Hi, y'all. My guest today is former State Representative Glenn Rogers, who is a rancher in Grayford, Texas. And he's become somewhat of a folk hero for his courageous vote against Governor Abbott on the public school voucher issue last session. So I've gotten to know Glenn over the past year because of our shared advocacy of public schools and our shared interest in talking about issues about life in rural Texas. So good morning, Glenn, and thanks for joining me.
Well, good morning, Suzanne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. Well, first, I guess I should ask you, how's your weather where you are? Because I think that's how all rural people start conversations.
Right. It's very foggy here on the Brazos River this morning. It's cool, but really nice for February. Actually, it's misting just a little bit right now, and I'm outside, so hopefully that won't interfere with the recording.
No, it'll be great. Well, it's cold here, so but I did get a chance to visit your ranch once, and it is beautiful there. So I can just imagine what a scene it is this morning. So, but seriously, we're going to talk this morning about something that I think rural folks don't talk enough about. We get a lot of news from our national news outlets, but we don't get a lot of news about what's happening in our state capital when our legislature's in session. And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping to do with this project, the Texas Rural Reporter, is just to bring more of those issues that impact, rural Texas, our daily lives, the things that matter to us, so that we can really be a part of that conversation. And I know you and I kind of share that belief that, rural Texans don't speak up enough. So we're going to talk about education today. But I first just want to see if you might just introduce kind of yourself and your background to those that are listening a little bit.
Well, I'd be glad to, Suzanne. I graduated from high school in Graham and then went to Texas A&M and received my Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree. And then I went back home to Graham to practice and to begin ranching on our family ranch. And I did that for about 11 years. And then I had a wild idea to go back to graduate school. And I really intended to come back and be in more of a consulting role and just do beef cattle and give up the other part of the practice. Not that I didn't like all aspects of veterinary medicine, but my passion has always been beef cattle. And just the way things turn out, I wound up actually taking an academic position, and I was on a veterinary school faculty long enough to be tenured, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the teaching part of that, and that's always been part of who I am, is not only the hands-on and working with particularly rural producers, but also I've always enjoyed teaching. And then I left academia to come back to tech. I was out of state. I left to come back to Texas. My dad's health was not very good, and I was also really homesick. And I came back to Texas and actually went to work in the animal health business. I did that for about 12 years, traveled all over the country. We wound up living in Aledo because it's midway between the airport and our ranch. And that was a great opportunity. I really continued teaching just to a different clientele, some of the best producers in the United States. So it was a lot of fun. And then 2012, I left the corporate world and began ranching full time. I was ranching all the time I was involved, but I was obviously not here a lot and had to have considerable help. Then I've always been really involved in organized veterinary medicine. When I was in practice, I was very involved with the Texas Veterinary Medical Association. But the organization I was most involved with after that time period was the American Association of Bovine Practitioners, which is a group of around 5,000 cow doctors from across North America, United States, and Canada. And I assumed some leadership roles there and wound up being on the executive board and president of that organization. We made several trips to Washington, D.C. during that time. And our primary area of interest was the rural veterinarian shortage. I became very interested in how we can repopulate our rural communities with veterinarians. Some areas are without a veterinarian. But as I began to really look into it, I began to realize that veterinarians are certainly not the only shortage. We have a shortage of teachers and plumbers and doctors and everything you can imagine. There was quite a brain drain that occurred in rural communities. And I became really interested in what we can do to revitalize rural Texas, where is, I believe, 150 of the 254 counties lost population in the last census. So that became a very real passion of mine, and that's what stirred my interest in running for office. I had never thought about running for office and had no idea what I was getting into. All I wanted to do was represent a little rural district and do my best to represent their needs. And what I discovered in that race was quite eye-opening. I wound up being in the legislature for 4 years, and I found out representative government is almost dead in Texas. It's very, very difficult to represent your district and survive the primary opposition that you get to particularly some of the billionaires that control the state. So, I kind of look back and I say, why did I go put myself through this? And I'm not in office anymore, but I feel like I have an opportunity to share my experiences and hopefully wake people up, and particularly rural people, to wake them up about what's happening in our state government. And it is anti-rural. It is unbelievably anti-rural. There's no concern for the needs of rural Texans when you get down to it. And this whole public school issue is one of my main focuses, because in my first district before redistricting, I had 32 school districts. And in each and every one of those school districts, the public school was the number one employer in that area. And we know how vitally important public schools are to our rural communities.
So let's segue into that then. And I keep calling it the politics of vouchers. Let's talk about that a little bit. You touched on that, this issue where there's this huge push underway in Austin to pass the school voucher bill. It's got heavy backing from the governor, the lieutenant governor. It's funded, this effort's being funded by, some heavy hitters in the PAC world, I call it the tech billionaire world. And there is propaganda, is what I would call it, being pushed out by, these conservative sort of think tanks and different, they're paying, these social media influencers who even aren't even from Texas. So there's this whole push around this issue of vouchers, which I think, I got really interested. I've always believed in public schools, but it wasn't until I saw the just craziness that was happening around these voucher issues and some of the things that were happening to our rural legislators who were literally representing their values, that I realized that there was some politics behind what was going on here. So, you were part of this group of 21 Republicans who basically voted to strip a voucher proposal out of a big school finance bill last session. That's kind of been misrepresented to the community, how that all played out. And it essentially killed vouchers. It's killed school funding because the governor sort of refused to, fund schools without the vouchers. Tell us, what was that like? Why, y'all felt so strongly to stand, on your ground the way that you did. And then what were the consequences of, that? I say it's a courageous stand, but what was the consequences of that stand for you and for our districts?
Well, the consequences were I had an unbelievable smear campaign. I've had people tell me that it was one of the ugliest they've ever seen. The difference in my campaign and some of my colleagues, though, is that I had been through this before. It was my third smear campaign, because my first race, I wound up, unbeknownst to me, running against the son-in-law of Ferris Wilkes, and one of the leading billionaires in the state that's really basically trying to control the state. And it was brutal. One of the things I've learned is all these different terms like disingenuous and grifting, but really, I'm from the country. They're lies. They're just 100% lies. And we've invented all these names for the number of lies that were told about me in my campaign. Here I am, a rancher, a Texas Aggie. I've used guns all my life, and always been a conservative, always voted Republican, and they try to portray me as some liberal that was anti-gun, that was against life. I'd always been pro-life, strong pro-life position, but that's their MO. They attack you. It doesn't have to be true, and so in one sense of the word, my campaign this last time wasn't as difficult on me as it was some of my colleagues, because that just become normal for me to have those kind of smear campaigns. What was different in this campaign is not only did I have the Wilkes-Dunn, I call them cartel, had not only the Wilkes-Dunn cartel against me, but I also now had the governor against me. I even had President Trump endorse against me. And I had not just a little of the Betsy DeVos group, the American Federation of Children, all the out-of-state voucher people. They put some money against me in my second campaign, but they went full bore in this. So it was a tsunami of opposition. Had all those together against me, and we just could not overcome it. There were some other issues, some rural issues that went on, particularly water. I was on the Natural Resources Committee. There were lies spread that I was trying to eminent domain individual water wells and just crazy things like that. I mean, I'm a huge property rights guy. Who in
Right.
God's creation would ever think that I would want to do that? But that's just what came up with those kind of lies. So that's what my political experience has shown me, that there's some people that are going to try to control Texas at any cost. What was very disappointing about the governor outright lied about me and my other colleagues.
Yep.
He couldn't win on vouchers, so he chose to say that we were weak on the border with absolutely no ability to prove any of that, because there wasn't anything to prove. We voted with him on every single legislative priority except vouchers. Everything he wanted to do on the border, we were right behind him. He also said that I consistently voted with Democrats, which was also a blatant lie. I was on the House Republican Caucus Committee, both sessions I was there, and we went back and looked at my voting record. I voted 97.5% of the time with the House Republican Caucus policy recommendations in my voting, and 96% of the time I voted with the Republican majority. So how you could say I consistently vote with Democrats is just a blatant lie. And it's disappointing that we would have, it defiles the office of governor for our governor to make those kind of statements.
I think like I said, that was the piece that woke me up, is when I saw like members of our own party not going after, not going after you on your actual positions, that, basically going after you because they couldn't control your vote on this one particular issue. And, I live in a rural community too. And I actually worked on education issues, back because I worked in the Capitol for a long time for the chairman of the education committee. And we looked at vouchers and worked on vouchers. Vouchers at that time was part of the conversation. It was this bigger, tool in the toolbox to bring accountabilities to school. It wasn't about getting rid of public schools, which is what I think the push has become, with this current. But, I had that experience. I now live in a small community. My daughter went through a small school, and I see the different dynamics that are playing out in these rural communities. And you recognize the importance of strong public schools, especially when we have no other options, and when these schools go away, everyone on the right, as far right conservatives will tell you that, private schools can come in and fill the gap. And I want to, relate that to, yes, dollar stores came in and filled the retail gap in our communities, but that didn't make anything better here. It made it worse. And so I think there's just this missing piece. But talk to me just a second about what are your conservative reasons for not supporting vouchers or those particular proposals that we've seen in Texas?
Well, first of all, I just want to make a couple of clarifying statements. Yeah, I used to support vouchers. That was the Republican platform before I started looking at running for office. I really hadn't delved that deeply into it. It sounded good. Give students another option, and we all want students to have options, right? But then the more you delve into it, the more I've studied vouchers, the more I'm against it. It's basically, just to summarize, it's a entitlement program that primarily benefits those who are already in private school. Other states have shown that 75% of those who get vouchers are already in private schools. It's not taking the disadvantaged child and giving them an opportunity to go to another school. That's the way it's presented, but that's not exactly how it happens. There's too many obstacles to that happening. For one thing, the voucher doesn't quite cover the cost of a lot of the private schools. And then there's the private school culture that costs. There's the transportation. There's all those things that aren't accounted for. And so it ultimately just most of the people that take vouchers in other states, and it's going to be the same way in Texas, is they're already in private schools. So why would we form another entitlement program that is going to cost the state billions of dollars when we have so many rural critical issues like water? Let's put that money to help with the water crisis in rural communities. Why would we want to start a whole new program? It makes no sense to me. It's not the Texas way to give up on the public school system. I believe there's no question that our public schools have some problems, but let's solve them like Texans solve problems and not just throw it away. I'm a very big history. Can I say something historical here? Okay.
Yes,
I'm a very big history buff. My great-great-grandfather fought in the Battle of San Jacinto. I had another great-great-grandfather that was in the 5th Congress of the Republic of Texas. I'm as Texan as it gets. 4 days before the Alamo fell, when before the Battle of the Alamo, the Texas Declaration of Independence was signed. And in that declaration, it stated that one of the reasons for leaving Mexico is because they were not providing public education. And every constitution that we've had since the Republic of Texas, all through the state of Texas, has called for a system of free public schools. And now with Article 7, Section 1 of the Constitution we operate under now in 1876, we still have that in the Constitution. It is the constitutional responsibility of every legislator to provide a system of free public schools in the state of Texas.
That is a great point. I've talked about that a lot, and especially for rural. I mean, it was our kids that weren't getting an education. And then if you think about where we've come, and literally this is a move to take us back to almost like a one-room schoolhouse type scenario where, my grandparents went to a one-room schoolhouse, and we were thankful when they could come to a public school because the opportunities for the education that they would get were so much better. And we'll just be taking our communities, back in time. It's baffling to me. You touched about several of the conservative kind of concerns I have. The other thing that I don't think is being talked about enough is when you talk about competing dollars. Right now the school system, according to the Constitution, is funded by a dedicated revenue source, which doesn't compete with water and other issues out of the general fund. And that's one of my other concerns is the way that they've structured this program, in my opinion, to get around the constitutional problems. I think they're literally creating a second kind of school system that they're going to have to fund independently. They're not solving the problems in the Texas, in the public school system or saving any money. They're just shifting the cost over to another funding stream that doesn't have a designated revenue source. It's going to come out of the same pot that things like water, funding for hospitals, infrastructure development on broadband and different things. So it is eventually going to threaten the funding ability of the state to do the things that they're required to do or that they need to be doing. And guess who suffers? We suffer already. So it just gets worse for rural Texas. So then we're going to have substandard schools, and then we're going to have substandard, infrastructure. And it just doesn't make any sense. This is not Republican conservative values that I grew up on or that I was taught. And so it's quite baffling to me to watch this all playing out. But real quick, I think what I love about you and how you've taken kind of your loss in the legislature and turned that into sort of becoming an advocate kind of on your own time, your own dollar, your own, impetus to continue to advocate for public schools. I know you're doing some writing for the Dallas Morning News. So if anybody's listening, Glenn's got columns pretty regularly with them. I know you're active on social media and trying to push out information. And I heard you might even be writing a book, so we need to watch for that at some point. But two questions. What can we do, as rural Texans to keep ourselves, to get into the conversation, to stay in the conversation? Stuff in Austin doesn't happen overnight. This might be a 4-month, drawn out process. What can regular people do? And then tell us, what are the choices? I mean, what are our chances of actually like stopping this,
Well, I haven't thrown in the towel yet. The Senate vote means nothing. The Senate has voted for vouchers for quite a few sessions. That wasn't a surprise to anybody. So no one should be down about that. It'll be decided in the House. We've lost members that obviously myself and others were taken out over that. And we have a new round of people that look like they're primarily going to be pro-voucher, but we don't know that. I think there's some information coming out that may change some minds. And it's not just the typical arguments that we've made, but if you look at it from the homeschool standpoint, we have some of the least regulated home and private schools in the country, and you're about to bring the government into your business. The statement, the money follows the child, is followed by the government follows the money always. You can never show me a time when the government doesn't give out money and they don't follow that money. And so I think particularly some of the people on the very hard right that are very, very pro homeschool. And by the way, I'm not opposed to homeschool or private school. I had one daughter that part of her time was in private school, part of her time was in homeschool because of her gymnastics activities. And I support all those. I just don't support taking dollars out of the public school to fund them. And I think they need to really think about what it is they're asking for. They're not thinking about the unintended consequences of bringing the government into their schools and into their business. And I think that's the area where we have the greatest opportunity in the Texas House. It's not with obviously, most, if not all, Democrats are going to vote for it. There's some Republicans that are going to vote for it, but you have some Republicans that I think if they really look and study, they're going to vote against vouchers because they don't want to take away the freedoms of the private homeschool community.
I've been saying that same thing. Hope isn't lost. I have seen the Capitol meltdown over way less controversial issues than this. During my time, when I was in the legislature, that was the year that the Democrats actually left the state and went and hid so that they wouldn't have to take a vote on something. I think that I think that's kind of what we love about Texas politics. Our system is actually developed, it's actually put together to kind of keep things from happening because we always, the founders of Texas wanted small government, right? They didn't want a full-time legislature. They wanted regular people down there doing the work of the state. And so I think the system actually favors the chaos, which I guess favors us being successful in this effort. So yay to the chaos is what I keep saying. So yeah, I agree with you. I think we just have to stay in the game, don't throw in the towel and don't sit on the sidelines. That's what I keep telling our folks here is, complaining about something on Facebook does not get the attention of your legislators. You've actually got to pick up the phone. You got to make that call, and I guess, you could tell us how impactful that information is in terms of you, as a legislator, being able to make decisions, does that information matter?
Well, certainly does. You can design a survey just about any way you want to. And some of these surveys have been so biased in favor of, if you ask the question, do you support school choice? Everybody supports school choice, but we already have school choice, so that's not a fair question. And so even in the ballot propositions for the Republican Party, the way that question was worded was totally biased, and it was a two-part question. And you're going to get the results that they wanted to get. High percentage voted yes, but that didn't mean they supported vouchers. So I relied heavily on the calls, texts, emails, independently, not form letters, but independently that came into our office, hundreds and hundreds of those. And I don't remember the exact number, but it was almost 90% of the individual information that came into our office was absolutely opposed to vouchers. Yes, we relied on that. It verified that what I thought was the wishes of my district was actually the wishes of my district. And so it did make a huge difference. And that's what I would encourage everyone listening to call your legislator. Even if you think they're 100% pro voucher and they won't listen to you, call them anyway. Mm-hmm. Call your senator anyway and let them know how you feel. Let them know how important rural Texas is to our state and nation. that would be my advice. I could give you some long-term things I think we need to really work on. If you do, we
Yeah,
have
let's do. We've got about 5 minutes, so let's.
okay.
Yeah, go.
One of the things, and this applies to the education community, is we need to reteach critical thinking skills,
Yes.
or begin to teach critical thinking skills. We have so much misinformation out there, and it's to the detriment of rural people, because we tend to just go about our work, and we're not, there's not as many activists in the rural communities as there is urban communities. We're just out there working hard, and we get this information and you don't know what's real and what's not. But we need to teach our students at a very early age how to critically evaluate information, particularly campaign. That would be a great class project.
Yes.
Where you look at campaign information, you say, okay, who paid for this? Where's the information come? Is it research solid information, or is it just propaganda? And we could do that. I think a lot of our educators have been so intimidated about doing things like that they no longer do it. When I was in the 6th grade, I remember it was in Miss Wiley's class in East Ward School in Graham, and we had a presidential election debate. And I represented Richard Nixon. My best friend represented George Wallace, and another friend represented Hubert Humphrey. And this was a very heated debate. We all got involved. We all researched the information about the different candidates. And when it came down to it, I had what I thought was a really good speech about Richard. This was before all the bad stuff, but I had all this great speech about his grandmother and how she had influenced his life. And then Fred Scott, who was my best friend, but also that was always one that made just a little bit better grades than I did and all that. But he said, well, we should vote for Richard Nixon's grandmother then. And it just totally blew my debate. But I still remember that to this day, that as a 6th grader, I was debating the pros and cons of different candidates and what they believed in. I don't know that that's happening today in our school system. It needs to happen. You can do that without the teacher having to say that teacher should never say whose side they're on. They need to remain impartial, but they should allow students to express themselves and get engaged in the political process.
I agree with that. I love that. Obviously, we were a pretty political household, at my house, because both my husband and I worked in the Capitol. So our child is she's like probably too political when it comes down to it. But yeah, I've always argued that if we could do one thing to really benefit our, schools, we've got to talk about civics and focus on all of that information, and then figuring out, why is this all happening? Because we've lost all of that history. And I think that that's, why our country's struggling right now to, we're being bombarded daily with more information than we can possibly process. And it's hard to sift through. And so I think what's happening is we've got generations of kids that are just disengaged, and even I would say my generation, I think there's a lot of kids, I'm not a kid anymore, but, young adults or adults my age that just don't, get engaged at the local level, state level. They might go vote at the national level, but, you and I know better than anything, the national politics does not impact us the same way that our local politics do. And so we've just got to really engage. And I think the school voucher issue is a great opportunity for us to rally the troops and educate, because this is one of those things that will absolutely impact us, period. I mean, there is no way that this is not going to have an impact on us. And it's not just teachers and schools, it's entire communities that are going to be impacted by this. So I think that's why I'm in this fight, and I want to really, get these conversations started. And then in the future, we can take this advocacy that we've built into issues like water and other things that are going to be important for the future of our rural communities. Because I think I think it's like we're about 25% of the population, right? But, even though we're
rural Texans are more like 10% of the population. But of course, it depends on how you define rural. But
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And it would be if there's 3 million rural Texans, like I've seen that listed several places, that would be only 10%.
Yeah, 10%. So we've got to have a really loud voice, which represents we contribute a lot to Texas and the economy. It's outsized what we actually contribute to the economy. But there's just not as many of us. And so somehow we've got to balance that. And yeah, I mean, I think I can count about 8 rural Republicans left in the Texas House. And that's pretty frightening, to be quite honest. So we've lost a lot of really great, representation over this silly voucher issue. So we have to stay strong. Is there anything else that I've missed or that you want to?
Well, I want to say one final thing is that most of the people that are supporting vouchers, I think they genuinely believe that it's going to help kids. I don't think they're malicious at all. I want to say that. But the people that are behind this, the people that are funding these efforts, billionaires that are funding this, their overall goal is to privatize and destroy our public school system. Vouchers is just a Trojan horse to get that done. And once you understand that overlying what is going on, and this is not a conspiratorial statement. If you look into it, I'm 100, and you know what I'm saying. And there's statements to verify that have been made by some of these people. But it is in my opinion, one of the most important issues that we've faced in rural Texas. And saving our public schools is so important. And I would encourage everyone listening, please get involved, run for school board, get involved in your school, talk to your representatives and senators, and let's save Texas schools.
Great. That's a great way to close. Thank you, Glenn, so much for your time today. And we'll stay in this fight, and y'all follow Glenn, and he's got great information to share and great insight on this really important topic. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Suzanne.